Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So welcome to our continuation of study in Srimad Bhagavatam. We finished last time, and so now we're starting over. Canto 1, Chapter 1. There's three introductory texts in the Bhagavad, the Canto 1, Chapter 1. Prabhupada calls these three texts the prelude of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so we'll maybe get that far. I want to talk a little bit about the Bhagavatam itself and what Prabhupada did. But basically, in this first chapter, which is called Questions by the Sages, or Vishwanath Chakravarti says, the questions of the sages at Naimisharanya. This really, you have these three prelude or introductory texts, and then in the first chapter there's only 23 texts, and so from 4 to 23, the sages at Naimisharanya forest are submitting questions to Sutta Goswami. I mean, first they spend a few texts extolling him, his exceptional qualifications, and then they ask him the questions that are the topic of this. And the Bhagavatam follows from the answer to these questions. So now, but before then, how the Bhagavatam came to America and to the rest of the world in the luggage of Srila Prabhupada, because having been instructed by his spiritual master that twice, with a letter at the end of Bhaktisiddhanta's life, toward the end of it, that he said it will be good for you and those that hear from him if you try to push on this movement in the English language. Now, actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told a lot of people that, because Prabhupada was educated in an English language college, Scottish Church College, and so he was, as they say in India, English knowing. Although the English he spoke, the kind of English educated Bengalis spoke to each other, was also not quite standard English. It was its own kind of typical English, which the British disparagingly called Babu English. But that's what Prabhupada knew, and the books that he brought with him, when I first saw them, and remember the books, Prabhupada did the translations himself and did all the publishing work. I mean, had to do everything to raise the money to do the translation. He learned to type on a typewriter and got them printed, and was going to the paper markets and all these things like that, and buying the paper and haggling with the printers and all these other things, and the binders, and also trying to advertise them that they were coming to people and so on. And so finally, when he came to the West, and I think the reason he came to America was simply that's where the ship was going. He was given this passage on a cargo ship, actually, which just had a couple of passenger cabins, the Jaladuta. And so he came with these Bhagavatams with him, these 3 volumes. And they look like this. This is not an original. This is a facsimile copy. But, I have the 3 original volumes. When I joined the temple, that's what was available with those 3 volumes. There were not any printed yet. When I finally got something new in the Bhagavatam, the BBT was doing the second canto in little paperbacks of each chapter, and that's the first Bhagavatam I read. That was new. Otherwise, you had to have these kind of books from the temple, and so the BBT was then editing them. And Prabhupada wanted it edited and turned into standard English. I had finished my coursework to a PhD in religious studies, and I had some papers due still. And so I decided to write about the Bhagavatam and about some things in the Bhagavatam for this paper. And I had a hard time with these books because the English was irregular. And what you have to do academically is when there is a kind of something unusual or an error in the text, you have a little brackets, and then you have the Latin word sic, thus, showing that this mistake was already in the text, or it was like that in the original text. And I realized that if I'm going to quote Prabhupada, I'm going to have 6666666 go through the text, and so I just put a footnote saying, this is the way it comes, and I'm not going to put it in there. But the guy liked the paper. I got a good grade, and so the professor. But that was the difficulty. So I was happy when it was redone. But the other thing, the good thing about these, is that Prabhupada's voice comes through very clearly, in a way that you don't, you can hear his feelings better in this so-called Babu English. And so this was published in 1962, and Prabhupada had this organization called the League of Devotees that he was raising money and going on, and residing in the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan, and then going back and forth into Delhi on the train or bus or whatever, I think the train. And so he dedicates this, the dedication page, published in 62, remember this, to Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, my spiritual master, on the 26th annual ceremony of his disappearance day. And then he said, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and his followers live with him. And then there's a preface before the table of contents, which was dated December 15th, 62 in Delhi. I read that before, but I think I'll read it again. Then there's a Prabhupada's table of content of this first volume, which has 7 chapters in it of the Bhagavatam. Then he has the motto, which is not reproduced in the English version when it was republished in America. And then his introduction. Now, most of the introduction is a preview of the life of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I won't read all of that introduction, but I just want to read some of that. I'll read this preface, and then some of the introductory material. So the preface is, We must know the present need of the human society. And what is that need? The human society is no longer bounded by the geographical limits of a particular country or community. So already he's thinking in 62 of where he's going to go. This is for the outside world. When Bhaktisiddhanta said to preach in English or write in English, it meant go to the West. And you know, Bhaktisiddhanta's whole effort when he made the Gaudiya Math was to send people to the West. And they had this 3-volume book of Sri Chaitanya's teachings by Nishikant Sanyal, who was a professor at Ravenshaw College, an English language school. And that when I saw that, I realized how carefully they had worked to make this very high-level writing and high-level English. And then those volumes went with Ban Maharaj when he went to London. First of all, Bhaktisiddhanta had some fault. Didn't like Ban Maharaj. Eventually, I don't know what was going on. They don't talk about it, but he recalled him. Was going to send somebody else to their little toehold in London. But then he had to pause for World War II. That was the next thing, because in their magazine, their regular publication, The Harmonist, they mention that there was also some devotees in Germany. That we are going to have celebrate Vyasa Puja in Berlin. For Srila Prabhupada meeting Bhaktisiddhanta in Berlin, and Herr Dr. Goebbels has kindly agreed to inaugurate the ceremony, so you knew what was coming. And in some ways, the Germans were more receptive to this kind of thing. I mean, they were into swastikas and all, you know. So then everything fell apart. I mean, the Gaudiya Math split up into warring factions after Bhaktisiddhanta left, and things like that. And so Prabhupada was basically facing the ruin of what his spiritual master had wanted. They're competing who's going to be the next Acharya and all these other kind of things. There was big competition between their temple in Mayapur and the Sri Chaitanya Math and the Gaudiya Math in Calcutta, the big marble temple that people began to fight over who would have what rooms and stuff like that. And Bhaktisiddhanta became quite disgusted even at that time. But then Prabhupada had these directions. He said he was not considered very important. He said, I was a rotten householder as far as his leading God brothers were concerned. Because they're all, because Bhaktisiddhanta had really taken Bhaktivinoda Thakur's movement and turned it into, with mats, monasteries, and full-time devotees. And that was the new thing. And so, but Prabhupada was like out of it. But he had the order and he did it. And he was and he said, the secret of success is to accept the order of the spiritual master as your life and soul and execute it. And that's what he did. And it turned out, in this one-shot deal of a passenger on a steamship to he knows where, ending up in New York City, where they were looking at London all the time, but here was New York City. Let's see what would happen. And as it turned out, there was a group of people who were, the initial people came from the sort of counterculture of the 60s, and they were double dropouts. I mean, you had to drop out from the regular culture into the counterculture, and from there into Krishna consciousness. That was the distance you had had to travel. And, one of the first Bhagavatam classes or temple, Sunday feast I went to when it was just showed up in Philadelphia. Some devotees from New York came down and started a temple, or rented a little place. One of the first questions was, and by the way, we had parachutes on the ceiling because that's what people did in the counterculture. You would take LSD and look at parachutes on the ceiling, wave up and down, and you get nice hallucinations, They had the parachutes on the ceiling and stuff like that. And one of the first questions someone says, how does chanting differ from LSD? What happens when you chant? How does it differ from LSD? And the devotee who was lecturing said, it's a different head, but it gets you there. He said, that was how it came, But somehow there was a reception, and devotees went to San Francisco and the Mantra Rock dance, and where Prabhupada was on stage with Allen Ginsberg, who led the chanting, by the way, not Prabhupada, because he was the draw. Anyway, that's how it started. So when I came, this is what I read. This is the Bhagavatam. A little later on, they started publishing the second canto in different chapters. He says, we must know the present need of the human society. And what is that need? The human society is no longer bounded by geographical limits of a particular country or community. The human society is broader than that in the Middle Age, and the world tendency is to belong to one state or one human society. The ideals of spiritual communism, now that was not big in America, but it was big in India, by the way. The ideals of spiritual communism, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, are based more or less on one of the entire human society. Nay, the entire energy, that's capital E, of the living being. So here is this idea of you're not the body and spirit soul. The need is felt by great thinkers how to make it successful ideology. And so he called this sometimes Bhagavat communism. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill up the gap of human society, and it begins, therefore, with the aphorism of Vedanta philosophy, Janma dasa yataha, to adjust the ideal of the common cause. You will see this in the beginning of the Bhagavatam. The first verse of the Bhagavatam after Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya says, Janmadhyasya yataha, which refers to that from which everything comes. This is from the Vedanta Sutra, the second sutra, Atato Brahma Jignasa, the first sutra. Now we will inquire to Brahman. The second, what is Brahman? Janma dasa yataha, that from which everything comes. Janma adi, birth, sustenance, and dissolution. That's the adi is etc. Birth, etc. comes. This is, and so that's why this Janma dasa yataha adjusts the ideal of the common cause. As he says here, the entire energy of the living being, not just human society, but everybody. He goes on, the human society is at the present moment, the human society at the present moment is not in the darkness of oblivion. It has made rapid progress in the field of material comforts of life, education, and economic development of the entire world, but it suffers a pinprick somewhere in the social body at large. and therefore there are large-scale quarrel even on less important issues. On less important issue, it's singular here. Therefore, there is the want of the clue as to how they can become one in peace, friendship, and prosperity by the common cause. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this gap by ontological aspect of human education. Now, when this is reproduced in the English version, they leave out ontological, just by human education. But it's a cultural presentation. It is therefore a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. That's really a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. What a sentence that is, huh? What an ambition. So he goes on now how to do this. Srimad Bhagavatam should be introduced also in the schools and colleges, as it is recommended by the great student devotee, a student, right? Prahlad Maharaj, in order to change the demonic face of society. And then he has the Devanagari, and this verse here, he has the Devanagari, and then 761 afterwards, 7th canto, 6th chapter, 1st verse, Komar Achara Prajna Dharman Bhagavatantika Durlabam Manusam Janmad Tad Api Avruban Artadam. Now, there's no diacritics, it's just Prabhupada's way of doing it. Then he goes on, disparity of the human society is due to the basic principle of a godless civilization. So that's the basic. There is God, or the Almighty One, from whom everything emanates. Again, Janmadasya. That, by the way, is not the Christian idea of God. There is God, or the Almighty One, from whom everything emanates, by whom everything is maintained, and in whom everything is merged to rest. That's the Janmadasyataha. The material science has tried to find out the ultimate source of creation very insufficiently. But it is a fact that there is one ultimate source, that's in boldface, of everything that be. This ultimate source is explained rationally and authoritatively in the beautiful Bhagavatam, or Srimad Bhagavatam, which he spells Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam. It is a powerful reading matter in Sanskrit language and is now rendered into English version elaborately, so that simply by its careful reading one will know God perfectly well. So much so that the reader, R-E-A-D-A-R, the reader, will sufficiently be educated to defend himself from the onslaught of the atheist. Over and above the reader, again spelled the same way, the reader will be able to convert others in accepting God as concrete principle, as anything. It begins with the definition of the ultimate source as the bona fide commentary of the Vedanta Sutra by the same author, Srila Vyasadeva. So that's the other idea that's introduced, that this is the author's own commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which is Vyasadeva composed that Vedanta Sutra. So this, because it's Janmadasya, this is his commentary. by the same author, Srila Vyasadeva, and gradually it develops into 9 cantos up to the highest stage of God realization. The only qualified required to study this great book of transcendental knowledge is to proceed step by step, cautiously, and not to jump on haphazardly. It has haphazard instead of haphazardly. Haphazardly, like reading an ordinary book. So you systematically should go through it. The book should be gone through chapter to chapter, one after another, and the reading matter is so arranged by its original Sanskrit text. So this is what he has done. Its original Sanskrit text, its English transliteration, synonyms, that's the word for word, translation, and purportful explanation. Purportful explanation. That one is sure to become a God-realized soul at the end of finishing the first 9 cantos. If you haven't made it yet, we're sloughing off. The 10th canto is distinct from the first 9 cantos because it deals directly with the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So it's all in to get you ready for the 10th canto. First you got to understand all these other things. One will be unable to capture the effect of the 10th canto without having gone through the first 9 cantos. In India, those people that we call the Sahajiyas, they go straight to the 10th canto. They all want the good stuff. Krishna's Rasa Leela with the gopis and so on. So he wants us to do it like it's given, right? And you won't get that until you do it. The book is complete in 12 cantos, each independent, but it is good for all to get them by small installments, one after another. So that's where we did. The Prabhupada had Bhagavatam class every day and go through it that way. I must admit my frailties in presenting the first part, but still I am hopeful of its good reception by the thinkers and leaders of the society. So that's what he's thinking, that this will appeal to the highest group of people. And the amazing thing is, the ones that showed up were not those kind of people he was expecting. But okay, this is okay. Yeah. I'm hopeful of its good reception by the thinkers and leaders of the society on the strength of the following statement of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he quotes, Tadvag visargo janato aga viplavo yasmin patishlokam abhadyavat yapi namami anantasya jasto akintaniyat shrinvanti gayanti grinanti sadavaha. On the other hand, that literature, the literature which is full with description of transcendental glories, of the name, fame, form, pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation of transcendental vocabulary, all, and this is in bold, meant for bringing about a revolution in the impious life of a misdirected civilization of the world. Such transcendental literatures, again, boldface, even though irregularly composed, is heard, sung, and accepted by the purified men who are thoroughly honest. And then he refers us to pages PP, he has PP, which means pages 259, where that verse is translated. I have it here, right? Yeah. And I want to read that purport. We'll get to it after. Let me just finish this. Finally, he ends, I am obliged to Sri Hanuman Prasad Podar of the Gita Press in Kalyan fame, who has gone through my work and appreciated the endeavor, has helped through the Dalmia Jain Trust to meet part of the expenditure of this publication. My thanks are also to other friends who have helped me in undertaking this great task. Om Tat Sat. And then C.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, dated Delhi, December 15th, 1962. Now let's go to this text number 11, 5:11, chapter 5, text 11. So again, the way Prabhupada translates it here, on the other hand, the literature which is full of descriptions of transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation of transcendental vocabulary, all meant for bringing about a revolution in the impious or impious life of a misdirected civilization of the world. Such transcendental literatures, even though irregularly composed, is heard, sung, and accepted by the purified men who are thoroughly honest. Prabhupada's purport. It is part of the qualification of the great thinkers, that's in boldface, to pick up the best even from the worst. It is said that intelligent man should pick up nectar from the stalk of poison. He should accept gold even from the filthy place, and should accept a good and qualified wife even from the obscure family, and he should accept good lesson from a man or from a teacher who may come from the untouchables. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone in every place without any exception. But a saint is far above the level of an ordinary man and is always absorbed in the business of glorifying the Supreme Lord, because by broadcasting the holy name, fame of the Supreme Lord, the polluted atmosphere of the world will have a change of heart of the people in general, and as a result of such propaganda, through the transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will become sane in their transactions honestly and diligently. So the English is a little strange, but notice the rhythm. It's like what they call the voice. While preparing this commentation on this particular stanza of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have had a crisis before us that our neighboring friend China has attacked the border of India in a militant spirit. We have practically no business in the political field, and yet we study situation that in old age there were both China and India, and they lived peacefully for centuries without any ill feeling between them. The reason is that they lived in those days in an atmosphere of God consciousness, and therefore every country over the surface of the world was God-fearing, pure-hearted, simple populace, and there was no question of political diplomacy for nothing. Practically, there's no cause for quarrel between the two countries of China and India on the issue of a land which is not very suitable for habitation, and reasonably there's no cause of fighting on this issue. But due to the age of quarrel, Kali, which we have discussed in these pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is always the chance of quarrel on slight provocation. This is due not to the issue at question, but it is due to the polluted atmosphere of this age, when systematically there is propaganda by a section of the people to stop, and this is in boldface in the original, to stop glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, There is great need of disseminating the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, also on Bold Safe, all over the world. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world, to do them the supermost good, as well as to bring about the desired peace in the world. Because India has failed in her duty by neglecting this responsible work, there is so much quarrel and trouble all over the world. So this is a call to Indians to do what you're supposed to do. We are confident that if the transcendental messages of Srimad Bhagavatam is received only by the leading men of the world, so that was his first hope, see, that the least, the really intelligent people, by only by the leading men of the world, certainly there will be a change of heart, and naturally the people in general will follow them. The mass people in general are, so to say, tools in the hands of the modern politicians and leaders of the people. If there is a change of heart of the leaders only, so that was how he was thinking. And we had it for a time, the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders, which lasted for some time. If there is a change of heart of the leaders only, certainly there will be a radical change in the atmosphere of the world's situation. We know that in our honest attempt for preserving this great literature, conveying the transcendental message, for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general, as a matter of re-spiritualization of the world atmosphere, is fraught with many difficulties. Normally we'd say fraught. It was fraught with many difficulties. Regard being had to the fact that our capacity of presenting the matter in adequate language, especially in a foreign language, will certainly fail, and there may be so many literary discrepancies in spite of our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with our all faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of the society will still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt for glorifying the Almighty Great, now so much badly needed. When there is fire in the house, the inmates of the house go out for help for the neighbors, who may be foreigners to such inmates, and yet without any adequate language, the victims of the fire express themselves, and the neighbors understand the need, even though not expressed in adequate language. The same spirit of cooperation is needed in the matter of broadcasting this transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the whole polluted atmosphere of the present day world situation. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values. Notice that, a technical science of spiritual values. And as such, we are concerned with the techniques and not with the language. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there is the success. When there is too much materialistic activity by the people in general, all over the world, there is nothing to be astonished if the person or nation attacks another person or nation on slight provocation. That is the rule of this age of Kali or Kwar. The atmosphere is already polluted with corruption of all description, and everyone knows it well than we can describe herewith. There are so many unwanted literatures full of materialistic ideas of sense gratification. In many countries there are census body appointed by the state to detect obscene literatures. This means both the government and the saner section of the public do not, well, you think of literature now, think of the internet and the porn, mostly it's porn, so on, do not want that such unwanted literature should be published, but still they are in the marketplace because the people want it for sense gratification. The people in general want to read. That is natural instinct, but because their mind is polluted, they want such literatures. Under the circumstances, transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam will not only diminish activities of the corrupted mind of the people in general, but also it will supply food for their hankering after reading some interesting literature. In the beginning, they may not like it, because in the diseased condition suffering from jaundice, one is reluctant to take sugar candy. So if you have malaria and you have jaundice, you don't want to take the sugar candy. But we must know that sugar candy is the only remedy for the jaundice disease. This is a home remedy. It works, apparently. Similarly, let there be a systematic propaganda for popularizing reading of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which will act like the sugar candy in the jaundice-like disease condition of sense gratification. When they have a taste for this literature, the other literatures which are catering poison in the society will then automatically cease, because they will cease to read them on account of transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam being available for reading propensity. We are sure, therefore, that everyone in the human society will welcome Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it is now presented with so many faulty and broken linguistic technicalities, because it is recommended by such an authorized person as Sri Narada, who has very kindly appeared in this chapter. So when Prabhupada came with this book, he had to create the audience and had to give people these things to remove the jaundice-like condition so that they could actually begin to relish Srimad Bhagavatam. And our capacity for spiritual experience has been, crippled by sense gratification. And we read in the Bhagavad Gita, the modes of passion, the modes of ignorance do that. And when one begins the process, especially as Prabhupada called the treatment by transcendental sound, not just the books, but also chanting Hare Krishna, the first effect of the chanting clinically is the modes of passion and the modes of ignorance decrease. And as they do, the mode of goodness becomes prominent, and then you can start to see things. And so we follow these four regulative principles: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meeting, no gambling. This is our principles. These are not just moral principles, they are principles of knowledge, of cognition. That's why Prabhupada calls it a science of self-realization, because you apply this properly and you'll see that something happens. Because knowledge depends upon sattva, on goodness. And this latent capacity of human beings for having this knowledge has to be brought out by proper education. But our education is now basically the aim of life is dedicated by the mode of passion. And the result of the mode of passion is misery. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. And when people become miserable and frustrated and so much because their desires increase without limit and nothing satisfies them, Then they go to the mode of ignorance, and therefore you have an opioids epidemics funded very nicely by people in the mode of passion. That's what's happened. You can predict it, that this would happen. And so this is the remedy. And those of us who relish the Bhagavatam and are learning it and learning its techniques and applying them, we have not only the obligation for ourselves, but for the human society. We owe it to Srila Prabhupada, but also if we want to save our country and our friends and our neighbors, this is the only way to do this. And we have all the resources actually handy. We can use modern technology, this internet, which has happened. And guess what? You know, the internet is a very bad thing, but now it can also be a good thing. So anyway, that's Prabhupada's. His introduction refers to this verse, so I read the whole thing. Anyway, so we'll start. That's the prelude. And so we'll start second class with the introductory text, which is the prelude of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay.
If you are on Facebook and would like to type in a question, go ahead and type it into the chat box there. We'll ask it out loud. If you're on the phone, press *6 and that will unmute you so you can ask your question. And there's also a chat box available on Ravindra Svarupa's website, rsdasa.com, that everybody's welcome to use if you prefer that method. And just as we're getting going here and reading this purport to 1.5.11, and Srila Prabhupada talking about the desire that people have to read literature. And it seems like that's gone down a little, somewhat. But would you say that, well, actually, as I was reading that, I was thinking perhaps we should even focus even more energy not only on books, but also on multimedia, broadcasting things like this on the internet, audiobooks, whatever it might be, to meet people where they're at, of where they're thirsty for.
Prabhupada, that books are the basis, but preaching is the essence. And then he says utility is the principle. So utility means use everything in Krishna's service. So it's here, we're using it in Krishna's service. And we can also, he was happy to have. Also, we would have plays at the Sunday feast all the time. When I was first coming to the temple, I played Nrsingadev in a play, with a lion mask and everything. We use those things. So all of these things can be used. We could have a huge movie studio. And so much parts of the Bhagavatam could be done, but those things require a lot of money. But we should think of it as the BBT is not just books, but basically media of all kinds, and the talent is certainly there, but it requires some funding and some effort.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu, he says, related to the preface, where we find, quote, it is a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. My question is, if Srimad Bhagavatam would be absent from this age of Kali, would it be possible for this re-spiritualization to happen? What is the importance of the Holy Scriptures in this context? Are they indispensable? Is it that without it nothing could be accomplished, spiritually speaking? What about the sages? Aren't they enough for the purpose of spiritually uplifting human society?
Generally in Kali Yuga that doesn't happen. We happen to be in that cycle where Krishna himself descends and therefore reveals his. This doesn't happen all the time. It comes in once in a day of Brahma. So we happen to be in that cycle, where Krishna actually shows his highest, most confidential pastime. Prabhupada defines confidential. Not everyone will appreciate it. So, they think of Krishna as some licentious person, who went off with other men's wives. And I've seen writings by 19th century Christian missionaries, saying things about all the time, criticizing Hinduism because of their idea of what Krishna is about. They don't know it. But this time when Krishna shows his Vrindavan pastimes, that's followed always by Lord Chaitanya, who comes and therefore gives us access to it in this Kali Yuga. So this is exceptional. This is quite. We just happen to be here in this particular Kali Yuga that Krishna comes. A day of Brahma is the length of 1,000 yuga cycles. There's actually 994 actual yuga. The time of 6 yuga cycles are sanjas with transitions, but this is when he comes of that many yuga cycles. So that's when it happens. Otherwise, we wouldn't have access to it, because Lord Chaitanya makes God available. And I had one professor say, the real question is not does God exist, but is God available? If he exists and not available, what difference does it make? But if he's available, then that takes care of the existence question. And really, you just say Hare Krishna, there it is there, Like really compact, simple, easy, and anyone can take it. And we start people with chanting Hare Krishna before they're qualified, and then it makes them qualified to understand what they're saying and to actually experience what's actually there. Because abhinatva nama namana, there's no difference between the name and that which is named. Nama chintamani Krishna chaitanya rasa vigraha shuddha purna nichimukto abhinatva. Abhinatva, non-difference. Nama, namanaha, the name and that which is named. So that's why the name of Krishna has these properties, because of those non-difference.
Mahamriti Prabhu asks, he says, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. What should be the balance between the message of the Bhagavad Gita and the message of the Bhagavatam? It seems that there was more effort to propagate Bhagavad Gita than the Bhagavatam. When do we know that the reader is ready for Bhagavatam after going through the Bhagavad Gita? And then he adds, it seems to me that the second chants book, based on the 6th canto, is often easier to relate to than the Bhagavad Gita.
I don't know. The Bhagavad Gita is another thing that Prabhupada wanted us to have, of course. And the Sanskrit in the Bhagavad Gita is really simple. I mean, you take a Sanskrit course in a university and you can practically read the whole thing. The grammar, is really easy. The Bhagavatam is very difficult in Sanskrit. So Prabhupada gave us both. And, we would have a Bhagavatam class in the morning, a Gita class in the evening in the temples. So we did them side by side. And both of them become more and more revealed as one makes advancement in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, so it's they reinforce each other. I can't say one is better than the other or easier than the other, but we've got all these things. So wherever you can get a toehold, you get going, or the second chance book or whatever, do it. But just increase. It's important that one should always increase Krishna consciousness. They're inversely proportional. Here's Krishna consciousness, here's Maya. If Krishna consciousness goes up, Maya goes down. And you're working on Krishna consciousness and Maya's going up, look at the other side, you'll see Krishna consciousness. This is the inverse proportion. This does not happen. People are trying sometimes, but that's the law of nature, the inverse proportion.
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu asks, he says, please accept my obeisances, Gurudev. All glories to your service. My question, regarding technical spiritual techniques mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, does this place bhakti and sattva over ritual and culture?
Well, the simplest technique of bhakti is chanting the names of the Lord. And really, you don't have much paraphernalia, like one string of beads, for example. And I mean, I like japa for that reason, even if you're by yourself. And the beads, and there's a very simple arena of events. There's the holy name, there's you, and there's your mind. That's the only actors on the stage. And so you focus your attention, that's intelligence, part of the subtle body. You focus your attention on the holy name. Your attention wanders away, as it tends to do. When you notice, you bring it back. Then you're chanting on the clearing stage. Now, if you're watching the TV and going nish 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 nom 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 nish 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 nom 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 nom, it's not very potent. But if you just make that your main thing, and then deal with your mind and just show Krishna you're interested by bringing your attention back when the mind wanders, and it turns out, your mind is like. Then you find out what your mind is like. And okay, because your mind is your subtle body, part of your subtle body, and it came with you from your previous life. So, we don't know the garbage that's in there, but you can deal with it now by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And you chant on this stage of just simple thing. Mind wanders, bring it back. That's the clearing stage of chanting. And you will see the modes of passion, the modes of ignorance go away. You may not know what to do with yourself because everything that we're asked to do is passion and ignorance, But that's when you start reading the Bhagavatam. You have to increase your spiritual life, because you will not be satisfied by, I got to stop this chanting, because I don't like popular culture anymore. Don't stop chanting. Find something else to do. So we give people something else to do. And so just always increase that chanting. So it's so simple. There's just you, your mind, and the holy name. We have the Hare Krishna mantra, which everything is in that. There's Krishna and Krishna's energies. That's all there is. That's when you say Hare Krishna, you've named everything. Krishna and Krishna's energies, and then you stick to it.
Vijay Krishna Prabhu asks, he says, related to the preface where we find, quote, to establish the ideal of a common cause, and also related to today's morning class given at the Bhakti Center in New York on the subject, quote, women in the life of Lord Chaitanya, his mother, and his 2 wives. In Vedic civilization, women are meant to accept protection from the father, the husband, and the eldest son. My question is, if a woman decides to reject this protection, is it that her spiritual development becomes damaged?
Well, she should do those things that help her spiritual development. Some women maybe not need the protection. That's fine. I would suspect that the women are becoming independent because they're not being protected. And they say, got to take care of them ourselves now because you can't trust men. So, if you want women to change, men should change first. We'll see what happens. But I mean, especially in Nityananda, one of his wives after his disappearance became the leader of the Sampradaya. We do have, another Ganga Mata Goswamini is one of the initiating guru that has already happened, which is not usual. I mean, she was a princess anyway, but still, they can do that. Just like we had, Queen Victoria and Elizabeth I, and Okay. All right, so we got a little start now. Next time we will start with the actual introductory text. So Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Questions by the Sages, and Text 1. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.